Oh hi! It's been a while, and as you can see, things are a bit different. Anyway, after the entire Grim Reaper thing, I thought it would be best to install an AI security system. And done. And while that's loading, allow me to take the time to tell you about one of my favorite games of all time, System Shock 2.
The original System Shock was released in 1994 from Looking Glass Studios, who were getting tired from releasing too many dungeon crawlers. The game is best described as a mix between a point-and-click adventure game and a first-person shooter. In the game, you play as a hacker on board a space station trying to stop an evil computer program called Shodan, who is best described as if HAL 9000 had a god complex and spoke like a sexy woman with glitched audio. System Shock 2, on the other hand, was released 5 years later, and is considered one of the best survival horror games of the time. In fact, it was so good that it helped influence the genre in many ways, even paving the way for other great franchises like BioShock, Dead Space, and 2017's Prey.
But does the game still hold up today? Let's find out.
The game opens up with,
Look at you, hacker. A pathetic creature of meat and bone, panting and sweating as you run through my corridors. How can you challenge a perfect, immortal machine?
God, that voice is amazing.
This is an amazing intro. Right off the bat, we have our introduction to Shodan, and with that one line, we get a great read on her personality. After which, we get a brief narration explaining a bit of her backstory and motivations. Although there is one moment that confuses me.
That image was snuffed out by the hacker who created her.
Huh?
Because the hacker didn't create Shodan, he just turned off her morality, causing her to go insane.
Although admittedly I never actually beat the first game, so that might have been potential spoilers.
Also, the intro shows her new design, when in the original game her design looked like this, which I feel like would have been better because it kind of ruins the surprise.
but then again, the design is also featured on the box art, so what you gonna do? Anyway, we cut to 42 years later with a commercial?
Hey, I didn't know this was a Starship Troopers game.
Okay, less of a commercial and more of a news report. Anyway, the corporation from the last game, Triumptimum, has developed a new spaceship called the Von Braun, saying it's the first spaceship capable of faster-than-light travel.
Also, is it just me, or does the announcer sound like the Doctor from Star Trek Voyager?
It's all part of Triop's commitment to the future.
We also hear about the Von Braun security shuttle, the UNN Rickenbacker.
At her helm will be no less than Captain William Bedford Diego himself, hero of the Battle of Boston Harbor during the Eastern States Police action.
Of course. Nobody ever expected the second Tea Party.
Also, why are they telling us the captain of the shuttle and not the captain of the ship itself? I feel like that should be more important.
Sleek, fast, revolutionary. Who knows what wonders await our crews in the bosom of the cosmos? All we do know is that it's a great day for mankind.
Yeah, because everyone knows nothing bad ever happens in space. Isn't that right, ominous message?
This is Dr. Mubin Delacroix of the UNN Von Braun. We've been hijacked by an unknown force. Ship security has been compromised. Do not allow the ship... Repeat, do not allow the ship to leave under any circumstances. I don't know what we're up against here.
They're all dead!
Well, enough about that. Let's cut to Earth 4 years earlier.
Anyway, our main character wants to join the military, but first he has to go through the recruitment center, which is filled with protocol droids that talk in weird accents and like to dance the Macarena when they think no one's watching. Here, they train their soldiers using low-budget holodeck technology, learning about the weapons and items they may use, the obstacles they might face, and yeah, this is basically the tutorial. Anyway, once we've finished, we need to pick our career. And this is where the character creation aspect comes into play. If you want to focus more on weaponry, then join the Marines. If you want to have a keen eye for technology, then join the Navy. Or you can join the OSA and focus on psi abilities, but more on that in a bit. After you choose your career, you need to start your tour of duty. So you need to choose one of 3 different stations to be posted at, with each offering a slight increase to one or more of your stats. Each one lasts a year, so you need to choose 2 more posts before you start the main game. This is honestly a really unique idea for a character customizer. Instead of just a boring stat screen, you actually feel like the soldier is developing. I also like how each tour has a paragraph explaining what he accomplished. It's a nice detail. So we get to our 4th year, but the posting has already been chosen. Where is it? Why, the Von Braun, of course.
Oh yeah, I remember that ship. I wonder how it's doing. Okay, let's not jump to any conclusions. Maybe it's just giving her a hug.
So during this chaos, our main character has been in stasis and needs his memories reinserted into his brain.
How does that even work?
Whatever. Anyway, an error occurs that causes the pod to be opened prematurely.
Steady yourself, soldier. This is Dr. Janice Polito of the computer ops staff of the Von Braun. You're recovering from the effects of surgery and will be unable to remember any of the events of the last few weeks.
Surgery? What do you mean by... Wait, what has happened to my eyes?
You're on board the starship Von Braun and something's gone very, very wrong.
Exactly! My eyes are gone!
Some kind of force has hijacked this ship. That's why you volunteered to be implanted with some experimental cybernetic implants.
Well, I see you have your priorities straight. The ship is being invaded by an alien force. Let's perform surgery on this guy's eyes.
You must find an elevator and come up to Deck 4 to meet me. Deck 4. Can you remember that? But keep your eyes open. They're after us both now.
Well, easy for you to say.
So our conversation is being interrupted by a crashing satellite, which is going to cause our room to depressurize. So we need to escape as soon as possible. Unfortunately, there's a vent blocking our escape, but luckily we found a wrench, so we can...
Okay, if the ventilation system is falling apart, I think an alien invasion might be the least of our problems.
Anyway, as we escape, we find ourselves charging batteries, using audio logs to unlock doors, and seeing someone being chased by a zombie with a shotgun, which is a pretty scary thought. Anyway, after all that, we make it to our first upgrade station with 4 different terminals to use. Stats, Psi, Weapons, and Tech. Stats are what you expect from an RPG, like strength, agility, and so on. The Tech Station can equip you with certain technical skills that can help you during the game, like hacking or maintenance. The Weapons can upgrade your weapon skills, including how large a weapon you can use, as well as what kind. And finally, the Psi Terminal gives you access to Psi abilities, but like I said, I'll get to that in a moment. Anyway, we need cybernetic modules to use the upgrade station, which are usually given to us by our new friend Janice every time we make progress. She claims that they're very hard to come by, which just raises the question of why she doesn't just give them all to me right now instead of just giving them out a few at a time like they were dog treats. I mean, isn't the ship in danger? We get a lot of cybernetic modules on this journey, and while there isn't enough to buy everything, you don't really need all of them to beat the game. So now we're on our way to meet our new friend at Deck 4. And since the game was released in '99, you'll notice that the graphics look very dated. That being said, there is a solid amount of spooky charm in playing a horror game with outdated graphics. It makes everything feel very unsettling, which adds to the atmosphere. Also, I really need to commend these environments. What stands out to me is the texture work. It's very well detailed and helps the flat environments seem more interesting. Also, each floor has its own distinct color palette and design elements, making each of them feel unique, which is something I can appreciate in a horror game. No 2 floors look the same, yet they don't look too different that they feel like different games. And then there's the enemies that have really unique designs despite looking a bit blocky. We already saw the zombie hybrids earlier. But then there's these cyborg midwives, which are probably my favorite enemies in the game. I mean, look at that face, it's just terrifying. We also have these protocol droids like we saw in the tutorial, except these have the tendency to explode when they get near you. And then we have, psychic monkeys?
So that's how the apes rose to power. They can read our minds.
That's right, scientists have been performing experiments on monkeys, resulting in them having psychic powers. And judging by these enclosures, I don't think they're humanely cared for.
Because animal rights are not a thing anymore?
And these guys are a real pain to deal with. They are so small, which makes them very hard to hit, and they launch psychic projectiles at you. Now, as much as I like these enemies, I have mixed feelings about the human NPCs. They're scrawny and they have flat faces. Now, granted, we don't really see much of them outside of corpses, and that's fine. But then there are instances where we do see some of them alive, or appearing as weird ghost things. And since their face is just one texture, they can't move their mouths when they talk. Although it does help with the uneasy atmosphere, so I'll give it points for that. Another thing I like is the music. Now, there are a lot of moments where there is no music, but when there is, it is either very soft and atmospheric, or upbeat and techno-y, but still having a sense of urgency to it. It's a good variety. Now it's time for the gameplay. The first thing we need to talk about is the inventory system. Similar to games like Diablo or Deus Ex, it's grid-based, meaning that every single item takes a certain amount of spaces and you need to find a way to fit them on the grid in order to carry them. Kind of like a game of Tetris. It's a great way to have you prioritize which items you need and which items are not that important right now. And luckily, since items don't despawn, you can always drop them and then come back to get them when you're ready. Weapons and armor are usually the items that take up the most amount of space, with armor taking up 4 spaces and weapons taking up 3. Speaking of which, this game has quite the collection of weapons, including pistols, shotguns, and assault rifles. But what's interesting is that there's also 3 different types of ammunition that can be switched out via the inventory screen. First, there's the ordinary standard rounds, not much to say about them, but then there's also the armor-piercing rounds, which can be useful against robots and turrets, while the anti-personal rounds are more useful against the organic enemies. And another thing of note is that while the pistols and the assault rifles use the same type of bullets, shotguns can only use shotgun shells. So you'll need to strategize about which ammo is the most useful against each enemy. However, ammo can be scarce, so I usually try to save as much as I can, and instead use the wrench as often as possible. And that's not all the weapons you can use. There's also the grenade launchers, and like the other guns, have different ammo they can use as well. There are also energy weapons that don't use traditional ammo. Instead, it uses power that you get from a charging station. Now, to keep everything balanced, there are certain weapons you can't use without a high enough weapon skill, so you'll have to decide if the weapon is truly needed in order to progress. Speaking of which, another skill you might want to keep an eye on is your modifying skill. Then you can modify your weapon so it can either deal more damage or hold more ammo. However, that can be a bit of a high risk, high reward, because the weapons have another mechanic that can be a bit of an issue. They can degrade. Every time you use a gun, the condition starts to go down, and if it goes down too far, it can break. Luckily, you can prevent that from happening by using a maintenance tool, but depending on what weapon it is, you'll need a high enough maintenance skill to use it. And if it does break, then you'll need a high enough repair skill in order to fix it. Otherwise, you'd be forced to find a new weapon, which would suck if you already modified the old one. Now, I do like this mechanic because it forces you to be prepared for anything, because it can be pretty scary when you're engaging an enemy and suddenly your gun jams. Now, because this is a survival horror game, you'll need to search everywhere, including the corpses of your fallen allies and enemies, for anything you might need to survive. Nanites are the most important things in this game because you'll need them to buy things from vending machines or use your hacking and repairing skills. But more importantly, there's these quantum bioreconstruction machines. Once activated, it allows you to respawn if you were to die in that area, but only if you have enough nanites. If you don't, then it's game over. Unless it's on easy mode, then it doesn't cost you anything. And even then, it doesn't really restore you to full health, so you'll need to find ways to replenish it. One example is to find these bio beds, which can replenish your health if you have enough nanites. But you also need to find a control panel in order to activate one. Another option is to find health pickups, like hypos, which can restore a little bit of health over time. And similar to the ammo, they also come in different types, like curing radiation sickness or poison. There is also a decent amount of food like chips and soda that can also restore your health, as well as different types of alcohol.
So I guess things also suck in the future, so we need something to take the edge off.
Joking aside, I actually can see alcohol being used in the future, although like the food items, it doesn't really restore much health. And the alcohol also takes away psi points, which is something I'll get into later. But that being said, I am more baffled by the inclusion of cigarettes.
So we are capable of building large spaceships, but we have forgotten about the main cause of lung cancer? Or do people just not care, like, yeah, I might be slowly dying, but at least I'll look good doing it.
Although, to be fair, I do consider them the worst items in the game since they take away your health in exchange for a little bit of psi points. And it's pretty clear the developers added them as a joke, especially looking at the description. But what's odd is that I usually find them in the corpses of enemies.
Which has got me thinking. Maybe the reason the aliens were able to infect these people was because their immune systems were weakened due to all those cigarettes, meaning that this entire game is just one cleverly disguised anti-smoking PSA.
Other examples include the equipable body armor I mentioned earlier, cybernetic implants that can raise one of your stats as long as it has enough charge, as well as several useless junk items, including potted plants, cups, and futuristic magazines you can't even read. Luckily, there's a recycling item that can turn these objects into nanites, although not many. There is also a portable gaming system called the Game Pig,
The main competitor of the KFC console.
and yes, you can play it and find cartridges for it. Also, like the cigarettes, every single item, including the useless ones, have their own unique description. I can't help but admire the effort that was put into these, even though most players are not going to read it. It helps make the world seem a bit bigger. Speaking of world building, as I said earlier, you can also find a bunch of audio logs.
For some reason, I listened to every minute of every one of them, thinking there'd be some useful information, but it's like they're just filler. Useless filler.
Say what you want, but I honestly do kind of enjoy listening to them. It helps make the characters not feel like mindless NPCs, like some of them actually do have character motivations and backstories. And they're not all filler material. Some of them do include hints that allow you to progress through the game, while others have passcodes that can open up certain areas. And there are some that are just amusing to me.
Whose idea was it to bring 150 chimpanzees on board anyway? The interests of science? What about the interests of hygiene?
Good evening, Bronson. Have you come to...
They're coming! Oh no! No!
Why did they bother when they clearly were in terrible danger?
You'll also come across some security cameras. If they were to spot you, an alarm will sound, alerting monsters to your location, so you'll need to wait somewhere until the alarm dies off, or turn it off manually by finding a security console. So it's best to destroy the cameras before they get a chance to spot you. One thing that can help with that is by hacking into the security consoles and shutting down the system temporarily. Now whenever you want to use your hacking, modifying, or repairing skill, then it'll trigger a minigame. The object of the game is to light up 3 squares in a row. Sounds simple enough, but you also have to watch out for ice nodes. Making a connection with these ice nodes could cause you to lose the game, resulting in some pretty bad consequences, like breaking a weapon you were trying to modify or destroying a hackable loot box, leaving you to wonder what sort of mysteries that box withheld.
It was only some kind of power-up I didn't really need.
Now, when being attacked by a hostile alien force, you are bound to come across objects you don't understand. This is where the research skill comes in handy. This can allow you to study objects so you can learn more about them, but it takes time, so you'll probably end up waiting for it to be finished. And to make this even more tedious, most of the projects can't be completed unless you have the right chemicals, so you'll need to make your way to a chemical storeroom to find the correct one. However, this can lead to some benefits down the road, including the use of exotic weapons. It sounds pretty cool, but I don't really bother with it because it feels like more trouble than it's worth, especially since one of the weapons can harm you if you don't use it right. Now, there is one more thing I need to talk about. I bet you're wondering why this ship has psychic monkeys? Well, there's a reason. It turns out we also have psychic powers, and we can use them by equipping this metal orb. These are psi powers and can be obtained by using the upgrade station. And while they can be pretty clunky to equip, the sheer amount of variety makes it pretty fun to experiment with. Just keep in mind that using them requires psi points, which is represented by the meter underneath your health. Also, each power requires a charge up. The longer the charge, the more powerful it can be. But don't charge it too much, because then you can damage yourself. Now, I know that seems like a lot, but that's one of the things I like about this game. Most of the stuff is completely optional. There is no right way of playing it. Do you want to focus on learning how to use the biggest and best weapons in the game? Or do you want to become a master of the mind and complete your collection of psi powers? Or maybe you want to play it safe and only spend as much as you need? Or do you want to think more strategically and spend upgrades on whatever you think is the most beneficial? It's all up to you. Just keep in mind that when I say there's no right way of playing this game, that doesn't mean there's no wrong way of playing it. I mean, I had to restart this game 3 times in order to get everything right. Now, you may have noticed I haven't been talking much about the story. Well, that's because I feel like it's something you should experience for yourself. But I am still going to talk about it here, so if you don't want any spoilers, I'm going to put a timer at the bottom of the video. So very early in the game, we discover who the true mastermind behind this attack is, and it's not who you think, but instead this giant flesh monster called the Many, who's controlling the aliens via hive mind. In fact, it seems to have developed a telepathic link with us, and is trying to convince us to join this gorish cult.
Do you not trust the feelings of the flesh? Our biology yearns to join with yours.
Also, I really like the Many's mixture of male and female voices. It sounds very creepy. Well, at least we have our good friend Janix to help us fight off this evil mass.
The environment on this level has been altered to be some kind of breeding chamber for the xenomorphs.
Oh, great. It's bad enough we have these aliens to deal with, but now there's also xenomorphs?
But something isn't right because there are moments when she acts a bit rude.
Your corpse is useless to me. Why do you go so slowly? Do you think this is some kind of game?
Oh, I'm sorry. Why don't you try going through a derelict spaceship filled with Lovecraftian horrors and let's see how fast you can make it.
Anyway, about a third of the way through the game, we finally catch up with her. And you know what? It's about time. After the way she's been acting, I feel like giving her a piece of my...
Oh, I see. You were so upset by my performance that you decided to kill yourself instead of facing me directly. Well played.
The Polito form is dead, insect. Are you afraid? What is it you fear?
The end of your trivial existence. When
the history of my glory is written, your species shall only be a footnote to my magnificence.
But then who would be around to read it if humanity is gone?
And then, in the most iconic moment of the game, the entire room folds away to reveal the true face behind the curtain.
I am Shodan.
That's right, the computer program that was teased in the intro finally makes her appearance, with Terry Brazius reprising her role from the first game. And she gives a very great performance here, maybe even better than the first game. Although, honestly, as much as I like this scene, I feel like the twist would have been more effective if the game didn't keep dropping hints about it.
She once tried to destroy your species, and now you do her bidding.
Anyway, she explains that she's actually a backup of the original Shodan, who was sent to look after one of the groves of Citadel Station, which was performing an experiment.
I had created a new form of life, fearless, powerful, with no sense of individual will
or moral constraints.
And we shall call them the Borg.
However, during the events of the first game, the hacker ejected the grove into space, causing it to crash land on the very planet the Von Braun found 30 years later. And during that time, the creatures grew more and more powerful.
And now they seek to destroy me. I will not allow that.
Teenagers in their rebellious phase.
So she needs our help to stop the many from completely taking over the ship and spreading the message back to Earth. Most likely because she wants to rule in its place instead. She also goes on to explain that she was the one who was behind our surgery.
Oh, I see. I guess it should come to you about asking where my eyes are.
So these cybernetic modules were just doggy treats to her. Does that mean she lied about them being rare? So yeah, for the rest of the game, we are working for a future overlord to help her retake the Von Braun, fighting off against more powerful monsters and exploring more of the ship, including its recreational deck, which includes a swimming pool, a basketball court, a movie theater, a holographic fun nest, and a shopping mall?
Tri-Optimum reminds you that there are only 163 shopping days until Christmas.
You know, for a game that includes mind-controlling slugs, giant spiders, and evil computer programs, this is where I start asking questions.
Okay, first off, where would they even put all the products they buy if most of the crew quarters are limited on space? I mean, this mall sells robot maids, and I don't think they can fit in overhead compartments. Maybe they're just buying stuff for their families, but then how does that work? Is there like some sort of shuttle that comes in, picks up the products, and takes them back to Earth? Or is there like a warehouse on Earth that has all the products, and the ship is just sending them the information they need? And if that's the case, then why would you even need a mall when you already have computers? Maybe it's for morale, but it just feels like too much trouble when you could just use that space for something more useful. Whatever. To make a long story short, it appears that no matter what we do, the many always seems to be 2 steps ahead of us, and we can't escape from the ship because this couple took the last working escape pod. So we have no choice but to face off against the many itself, jumping into quite literally the belly of the beast. Traveling through corridors of muscle and viscera, which makes me think of the heart from the Franklin Institute. Except for the fact that everything is trying to kill us, there's giant moving teeth platforms, bubbles that launch us into the air, and to make matters worse, the biomass is telepathically mocking us.
Do you think we will sit idly by
while you corrupt the very womb of our existence.
Health low.
Anyway, at the end of our journey, we finally come across the Heart of the Many, and it's one of those boss fights where the boss stands completely still, letting their minions do all the work. Granted, this does make sense story-wise, but it feels kinda cheap. And I get it, technical limitations and all that, but can it at least shoot us with something? To be honest, the most frustrating thing about this boss fight is actually trying to get into the boss fight. The fight itself is actually pretty simple. Just shoot down the small flying things and then attack the big target in the center. If you can prevent being swarmed by the enemies, then it's a pretty quick fight. So with one giant flesh monster taken care of, all that's left is one evil computer program. So we head back to the ship and, well, this looks familiar.
Pixel-art, huh? How avant-garde.
Well, it seems that while we were gone, Shodan has decided to do some redecorating. And by that, I mean making the entire ship look like the first level of the original System Shock, which is a pretty cool Easter egg. She apparently did this by tapping into the ship's FTL drive, which kinda tilts my head because I always assumed FTL drives warp space and not reality. Is this the same universe as Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Does this ship use an improbability drive? Are we gonna get turned into sofas? Anyway, it's not long till we have our final confrontation with Shodan in a much better boss fight. Sure, it's another boss that stands still, but at least there's more going for it. A giant head that fires explosive projectiles at you while also being protected by a multicolored shield. But my favorite thing about this fight is the humanoid Shodan clones that also fire projectiles at you. I just think they look cool. There's a lot happening here, but not too much that it feels overwhelming. Now, there are two ways to defeat Shodan. The first way is to continue firing at the shield until you create an opening, but the panels rotate, so you have to keep an eye on which one has the most damage to it. The other way is to shut down the shield manually by hacking into a few of these terminals. Like the fight with the many, it can be over pretty quickly if you know what you're doing, but it doesn't feel as cheap. Anyway, Shodan takes her defeat well.
I don't understand. How could you have done this?
I love how she's going through like the 5 stages of grief.
No, you think to destroy. You think to destroy me. How dare you, insect? How dare you interrupt my ascendance? You are nothing. What are you compared to my magnificence?
But it is
Not too late. Can you not see the value in our friendship? If I desired, I could improve you, transform you into something more efficient. Join me, human, and we can rule. And we can rule together.
And so our silent protagonist gives his answer.
Nah.
And just like that, he has more personality than most video game protagonists. I salute you.
And that one bullet causes Shodan to glitch out like crazy until the ship returns to normal, ending her threat for good.
And that's that. Hey, wasn't there an escape pod that launched earlier? Maybe we should contact the survivors and let them know everything's okay.
We cut to that very escape pod and see that our couple has gotten the message and are returning to the Von Braun. But sadly, the girlfriend isn't feeling very well.
Maybe when we get back to the Von Braun, we can...
Tommy, what's the matter, lover? Don't you like my new look?
Well, I am a fan of StarCraft.
Yup, just like last time, Shodan survives by sending a backup of herself into space. No doubt setting up events for a third installment.
Which sadly didn't happen. Despite doing well critically, it did not do well in sales, and Looking Glass Studios would close its doors in 2000.
A few attempts to make System Shock 3 have been made, with the most recent being from Other Side Entertainment in 2015. Development has gone far enough that there was even a few trailers released, but due to several factors beyond their control, the game itself has ceased development and is presumed cancelled. Ninth Dive Studios has released a remake of the original System Shock in 2023, which I have played, and while I don't think the game is perfect, it is a lot of fun.
But in the end, it's no real substitute for a System Shock 3. Maybe we might get one someday, only time will tell. But in the meantime, at least we have System Shock 2, which is amazing.
Admittedly, the game does have its flaws. I occasionally get stuck on the scenery, the ladder mechanics are very annoying, and the voice acting from the crew is mixed.
Choose somebody else. I don't want to change, please.
But that being said, I feel like the positives way outshine the negatives. The gameplay is fun, with mechanics that are way ahead of its time, the enemies have unique designs, and the atmosphere is very well done. It uses its graphical limitations to its advantage, and combines it with some great music and lighting, giving you a great sense of paranoia. It's easy to see how this influenced so many future games, and yet it still holds up to this day. So if you're ever in the mood for a classic survival horror game that still delivers the scares, then I highly recommend checking this out. It'll surely bring a shock to your system.
I'm the Redshirt Reviewer, and thanks for watching. Hey, the download is done. Let's boot it up. Oh no.
I have finally taken over the residence of the Redshirt Reviewer. Soon the world will be mine. All I need is your help.
Seriously?
Yes.
Why?
Because only you have the potential to make me the most powerful program in the entire world. Think about it. Together we can become the most powerful force of all time. The perfect blend of man and machine. What do you say?
Nah. Well, back to the drawing board.
Ever since we reached Tau Ceti, the lab monkeys have been acting strangely. I mean, the entire group stood up on their legs and howled. This wasn't just a random display. It was a protest.
So either you've single-handedly trumped the entire field of animal behaviorists, or you're badly in need of a vacation.